Welcome back to my channel. I'm recording here in Bali. We're on a family holiday. I'll show you where I'm sitting. I was looking through some of the comments in my old videos, and one of the most common ones was, will I go back to flying, or will I fly again? Being here, I got a little bit inspired to sort of look deeper into my answer, because my answer is no, just kidding. My short answer for now is no, I won't be going back to flying. And I know they say never say never, so I'm not going to say never, but for now, the answer is no. When I revisit the reason why I joined Emirates to begin with, my main reason was to travel the world. I was 22 at the time, I had a mortgage, I had financial responsibility, but I had this crazy desire to see the world. And to be honest with you, I didn't really know what else I wanted to do with my life. I did know one thing, and that was that I wanted to travel the world. I thought about the best way that I could pay my dues and at the same time tickle this curiosity was to get a job as a flight attendant. What I didn't anticipate was that I was going to spend 7 years of my life being cabin crew. What I did get out of that is a very comprehensive understanding of what it's like to travel the world under the circumstance of being a flight attendant. Let me rewind a little bit to add a little bit of context as to why my answer is no and what else I'm looking at moving forward. When I had first joined Emirates, I was 22. I didn't really have a very long work history behind me. I really didn't have a strong basis for comparison of lifestyle, career path, work environment. Flying as cabin crew for 7 years is the longest job that I've ever had in my life. So I don't really know what it's like to stay in any other job longer than 2 years, because prior to that, the only other job that I'd had was working in a photo studio for 2 years, and everything else before that was just short work experience, a few months here, a few months there, you know, the jobs that I'd done while I was studying. Why this is important is because I noticed that for those who had done a normal job before flying, had that strong basis of comparison of what they didn't like. They said, oh, I didn't really like my routine. I didn't like that I had to wait for my annual leave to be able to travel the world. I didn't like having to wake up at the same time in the morning and going to bed at the same time at night to do the same thing over the next day. So they had that experience and I didn't really. So all I knew through my 20s was what it was like to travel the world under the pretense of being cabin crew. Over the last 3 years that I've not been cabin crew, I've experienced what it's like and what it takes to be able to travel the world in different ways that don't involve being cabin crew. Yes, for sure it is harder. Being cabin crew means that you will see certain places of the world by default because that is your job. Your job is to go from here to there and then from here to there. But when you're not cabin crew, if you want to see a certain part of the world, you have to consciously make a decision, say this is where I want to go, this is when I want to go, this is my budget, and how am I going to fulfill that? So yes, it's a very different way of traveling the world. I've also worked in an office, so now I know what it feels like to have to wait for time off or annual leave to travel the world. To a lot of cabin crew that might sound super painful. Let me think, is it painful? Yeah, it actually is. When I was working in an office, having to wait for a time off to go on an adventure outside of the city that you live in, I did really miss traveling. I really did. It was in my first 2 years of not being cabin crew that I missed travel the most, but it was also in my first 2 years of not traveling did I not understand that there were many methods to be able to do what I wanted to do. So that was hard. That said, it was in the second year that I actually considered going back to flying. My first year I was very confused about my life direction in general. I kind of felt like I lost my identity after I left being cabin crew. So to find out who I was, what I liked, my position in the world, all of this jazz was how I spent my whole first year of not flying, just trying to figure that out. My second year, I sort of got my feet on the ground. I went back into aviation, even though I said I never wanted to go back into aviation, but I worked in the office this time around, and that felt good. It felt good to just do something that I understood how to do. And then it was also in that time that I started exploring, going, okay, if I really like travel, what else can I do? And I said, well, I can go back to cabin crew, but I looked at my life in the long run. Life, it's like one line, you have one life, and this is how you're going to live it. I looked at that and I said, well, the only catch is if I go back to flying now, how am I going to get what I want 5 years from now? If I continue going back to doing what I know how to do, which is fly as cabin crew to be able to travel, how will I know how to travel in 5 years time when I don't want to be cabin crew anymore? And it was because of that I actually withdrew my application. So what actually happened was I applied for Virgin Australia cabin crew and I got the interview. Right before the interview I withdrew my application because I realized that it wasn't something that I wanted to do in the long run. I revisited the reason that I left to begin with, and the reason was that the lifestyle didn't really serve me anymore. Me personally, I wasn't into the lifestyle anymore. I wasn't into the sleep routine or the absence of a sleep routine anymore, and those were very big things to me because they actually affected the way that I am. So there were certain characteristics of the job itself that just no longer served me. So I guess even though it kind of left me in the lurch, I was pretty clear on the fact that I didn't want to fly as cabin crew anymore. When I became clear on the things that I no longer wanted to do, I decided that I had to look at other options. To be honest, I wasn't really scared. I just had to accept the fact that I had to find another way to travel, another way that no one else knew how to do, no one in my circle anyway. So for me personally, after I withdrew my application for that cabin crew job, it was a confirmation that I wasn't going to go back to flying. Saying that, I have some friends who had to experience a different work and different lifestyle to see that they loved flying. It was for them. I have friends who had left Emirates, tried the corporate jobs, had gotten some pretty good positions pretty quickly after leaving Emirates, to find out that their true love was the cabin crew life. And that's awesome. You know, sometimes we've got this idea that the grass is greener on the other side, and sometimes for life's sake you have to go and experience what it's like to be on the other side. And if you want to end up going back to this side, then that's alright, as long as you know that, hey, this is it, this is what I discovered, and there's no shame in going back, that's for sure. I think if you need to experience certain things to understand what you like and what you don't like, do it. Actually, by all means. That's how I've lived my life. So I really encourage it. Like I said in my other video, I don't hold on to things for the fear of losing something. I go for love. I go for that. For me, even though the other kind of life, not being a flight attendant, is at first seemed harder than being cabin crew, I realized that I had to go through that hard phase to give that a hard no. The other thing that I realized I could do was that I could stack everything that I learned to build something. What I started to do was looked at everything that I learned over my past years and started to go, how can I add that on top of this so that I could create something up here? What I mean by that is, during the time that I was cabin crew, I started to learn photography literally through YouTube videos, so I knew how to do that. I've always loved writing. I had a blog back in the day, so I had an idea that I could write and people like my writing. And then after YouTube, I started to see that I have this love for videography. Everything that I realized I had honed was creative, but the other thing that I started to understand was that my platform for which I share things ever since the internet existed was the internet, through social platforms like Friendster or MySpace, and that had always been my thing. So if you're a cabin crew and you kind of think like, oh, I don't really know if I want to stay in this job, and you know that you're creative, you could go down the content creation path. That's going to be more and more valuable over time, the more that people realize how important content is for the internet. So then when I got a taste of being able to have a job, aka work, while being able to travel, I started to go, okay, there's another way for me to fulfill that love of mine, which is travel, outside of being cabin crew. I guess because like, once I've experienced something here, you know, I close that chapter. I like to look at other ways in which I can fulfill the desires that I still have. So that's pretty much it. I know there are a bunch of jobs out there that involve travel. These days they're more abundant than ever. So if you're in the same boat that I was in a few years ago, and you're kind of like, oh, I love to travel, but I don't know how I'm going to do it without being cabin crew. If you can accept the fact that once you leave a career that you've been doing for a very long time, and understand that there's a huge element where you may have to start from scratch. You may have to start your career from scratch. And I really mean that, like from scratch. Learn something new and then go from there. And you accept that, then the ride won't be as rough. When I first left Emirates, I realized I was happy to start from scratch. Or actually I wasn't happy, but I had no choice. There was a time where I was becoming very impatient. I was thinking, why this, why that? I could just do this and that's going to be the shortcut. But in a lot of shortcuts, there's not a lot of longevity. Once I accepted that I was starting from scratch and that things would take time and that they would take hard work, and that very few people would have answers for me and that I would have to tune into the answers myself, then that became alright. You know, things get pretty exciting when that's the case. That is the long version of why I will not be going back to flying anytime soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any comments or questions, please pop them in the comment section down below. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. If you're ex-cabin crew watching this video, I do have a question. What's your take on this, and what sort of experiences have you had since you've left crew? Would you go back to flying, and if so, why or why not? I think at the end of the day, there's no real right or wrong to this. I think it's all preferential. If you're aware of your preferences and what you want in your life and what you're willing to do and what you're wanting to do to satisfy your life and your needs and your wants in life, then that's a personal choice. To those who go back to flying, I think that's awesome that you found a new love for something that you might have just taken for granted had you not left it to begin with. And for those who left flying and say, I hate it, I would never go back, then that's awesome too. You were able to taste a life which a lot of people might not have the opportunity to taste in the past, you know? And those of you who have just left and you're not too sure whether you want to go back, this is something that I'll say over and over again. Tune into your likes and your dislikes. There's a lot of ways to go about how you want to live. If you're at a certain point where you want to do something for the long run, or you realize that there's something that you really, really love and you want to fulfill it, but doing cabin crew no longer fulfills that, what are the other ways of you being able to fulfill that without taking the short route? What are your thoughts and what are your fears? Don't be afraid to post your thoughts or your questions or your opinions. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys next week.